post-traumatic stress diagnostic scale test, that's the one that you scored yourself, right?
Yes.
You sat down and you looked, and the way that one works is that there are 49 questions, right?
Yes.
And then there's an answer sheet, right?
Yes.
And then there's a round circle that's filled in for the answer, right?
Yes.
And again, the validity of that test depends on the person answering that test accurately, right?
Right.
And so, for example, let's say that the person lied on that test. Let's assume that that's what happened, okay? With
Yes.
regard to a PDS test. Wouldn't you agree that that would invalidate the results of the PDS test?
Yes.
And if it were used for the post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis, that would be a faulty diagnosis, right?
Yes.
Because it is used, if you will, as a way to confirm, right?
Yes.
Well, in this case, isn't it true, sir, that with regard to this PDS, the defendant lied on it?
No, that's not true.
There's also a part of this test that includes the questions, doesn't it?
Yes.
If I could have that. Where is that?
I don't have it with me, apparently.
Well, why don't you have it with you?
I must have left it on my desk. Must
Sir,
have left it on my desk.
isn't it important to have a complete file so that you can answer whatever questions come up? And sir, if it was done by you and you were going to score it yourself, why did you use a pencil?
Why did I use a pencil?
Yes, instead of a pen.
I prefer to use a pencil.
And that's so that you can make some changes on it, if you want.
So are you implying that I cheated on that test?
No, sir, I'm asking you some questions. However you want to take them is up to you. I'm just asking you some
Okay, ask me the
questions.
question again.
And the fact that at the time that you administered the PDS, she was still telling you that it had been the intruders who had killed Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
So with regard to the first question, the person who's taking this, in this case the defendant, is asked to identify whether or not any of these events, serious events, have occurred in their life,
Throughout
right?
their lifetime, correct.
Right, because these kinds of events are the kinds of events that trigger these responses that we've been talking about. Loss of memory, right?
Yes.
That trigger the foggy memory, right?
Yeah.
And, for example, the first one says, serious accident, fire, or explosion. For example, industrial, farm, car, plane, or boating accident. And the defendant answered yes to that one, right?
Correct.
With regard to number 2, natural disaster, for example, tornado, hurricane, flood, or major earthquake, the defendant also answered yes to that one, right?
Yes.
Number 3, she's asked about non-sexual assault by a family member or someone you know. When it talks about someone you know, it isn't talking about you. It's talking about somebody the defendant knows, right?
Yes.
And it says, for example, being mugged, physically attacked, shot, stabbed, or held at gunpoint by someone you know, right?
Yes.
And she said, with regard to that, yes, right?
Yes.
And then she says, number 4, non-sexual assault by a stranger, right?
Yes.
For example, being mugged, physically attacked, shot, stabbed, or held at gunpoint. It's the same question as above, number 3, only this one talks about a stranger, right?
Correct.
And she answered yes, right?
Yes.
Number 5, sexual assault by a family member or someone you know, for example, rape or attempted rape. She said no to that, didn't she?
Yes.
We heard testimony about issues from the defendant previously that she indicated something about a situation. I'm asking you whether you're familiar with a situation where she claims Mr. Alexander may have taken some her clothes off and may have penetrated her. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And you characterized that one as a rape, didn't you?
Yes.
When we had our interview.
Yes.
But here, number 5, she says, no, it wasn't that, right?
Yes.
Then this test goes on to part 2, right?
Yes.
And it is asking the individual who's taking this test, in this case, the defendant, a question, right?
Yes.
And this is one of the guiding questions that determines or substantiates or confirms or helps you confirm the presence of PTSD, right?
Yes,
And in fact, the way you indicated were that, in your report, were that her scores on the post-traumatic stress disorder scale confirm the presence of PTSD, right?
yes,
It says here, if you mark yes for more than one traumatic event in part 1, indicate which one bothers you the most. If you marked yes for only one traumatic event in part 1, mark the same one on the answer sheet, right?
yes,
And she's asked about the same 12 questions that we've just gone over, right?
yes,
And the one that she indicated was the traumatic event in her life that triggers this post-traumatic stress disorder is what? Why don't you read number 4?
non-sexual assault, stranger,
Not somebody that she knows, right?
correct,
You said that you reviewed the photographs of the crime scene, right?
yes,
And you talked about Mr. Alexander being in that shower, right?
yes,
He's not a stranger, is he?
no,
He's somebody that she knew, right?
yes,
And it's talking about that the thing that triggers it for her, this PTSD, is non-sexual assault by a stranger, correct?
correct,
But you used it, you knowing, you just said, knowing that this was a lie, you used it and then concluded that those scores on that PDS confirm the presence of PTSD, even though you've just now told us that this is based on a lie.
Perhaps I should have re-administered that test.
Because this is one of the foundations for your finding of post-traumatic stress disorder on the defendant, right?
Correct,
The validity or this test really is only as good as the person who is telling or filling it out, right?
that's true,
So if they're lying, then the test is not very good.
that's correct,
And in this case, we do have a circumstance where you know the defendant's lying and she lied on the test, right?
well, her answers didn't reflect what we ultimately discovered.
Right, so she lied, right?
Yes, or her answers may have been consistent with the story
Well-
she was telling.
Well, 533, question number 14, the answer, that's a lie.
Yes,
And she was given many choices, including right above there, non-sexual assault by someone she knew, right?
yes,
So that is a lie, right?
yes, it's, well, again,
Oh, hold on, sir.
I'm sorry.
One of the things that the defendant told, or what the defendant told you was that this story about the strangers was fiction, correct?
That's correct,
And that, in fact, she had been the one to actually kill Mr. Alexander, correct?
yes.
And yet you did not administer another PDS, correct?
That was an oversight and I should have done that.